modesty, health. These are not what Jesus is talking about here. But nevertheless, all of these things, all of these impulses and all of these things, they can cause problems, right? They can cause problems with money, they can cause problems with relationships, and a host of other downstream problems, right? Like if you're constantly concerned about what people are looking at, what you're wearing, I mean, I've seen pastors, they'll go broke wearing clothes that are more than what their congregation makes. It's awful. It's awful. And that can cause a host of problems, right? Especially in a relationship. If you're a clothes horse, right, I think they call them, it even has the tags on it still, that could be a problem in your relationship. And if it isn't, it could be a downstream problem as you go along. So this kind of thing can definitely cause downstream problems. But when we look at this and we begin to unravel it, ready? A lot of our anxiety comes from this. And this is what Jesus is saying. A lot of our anxiety comes by realizing that we care more about what people think about us than what God thinks about us. That's what Jesus is talking about here. And around this time of year, when we want to dress nice, we want to give nice, we want to appear nice and do all these things, are you more concerned about what people think about you than what God thinks about you? That's the problem. That's the problem that's being addressed here. It has really not a whole lot to do with clothing. It has a whole lot to do with you and what you think. But you know what's really interesting about all of this? It's strange to think. This is the strange part, and this is the irony of all of these things. It's strange to think that if you are more concerned about what God thinks about you than you are about what the world thinks about you, that you will actually have less anxiety. Isn't that strange? It's a very strange situation to find yourself in, but it's true. When you come to the realization that it's more important for you to look honorable before God than it is for you to look honorable before the world, guess what happens? A lot of your anxiety starts to go away. It starts to go away because you're not constantly concerned or thinking about trying to please all of these different people and fit in or not fit in or conform or not conform or individualize or whatever. When you are more concerned about looking honorable before God, your has a tendency to float away. And that's what Jesus is saying here. So when you go through life, I'm not talking whatever. I'm talking about being honestly. You know, a situation came up when I first came to this church. There were some things hanging on the wall out in the foyer. Just atrocious, ugly things. They were like brown and red and orange tweed carpet mat up on the wall, just awful. And I came in one day and I'm like, this is terrible. And I just took it down because it looked awful. And when I did it, one of the men of the church was like, well, why are you taking that down? And I said, because it looks awful. Well, why would you do that? I said, well, do you want to put it up in your house? And he said, no. And I said, well, then why would you want to put it up in God's house? A stern look. Same guy later on, oiling the joints, hinges on that door right there, that very door, oiling it with 1040, or WD, look at me, Mr. IRS. WD-40 in the joint, in the hinges, and letting it run down the crack, all black and dirty, and leaving it. And I said, you're not going to leave it like that, are you? Well, what do you mean? I'm like, would you do it in your own house like that? Same guy. Well, no. Well, then clean it up. You care more about your own stuff in your own world than looking honorable in the gets. Anxiety. Christ frees us from this. We don't have to worry about what we look like in front of God, right? Because when He looks at us, He sees Christ. So then what do? We serve out of gratitude. So what happens is we start serving out of gratitude. We have less of an attitude of the world because we know that when God sees us,